anything, you've got time on your hands to really think. Your brain becomes your biggest resource. Maybe your physical energy is not where it needs to be. But listen, the long and short of it is you've got to redeem the time. There are books to be written, jobs to be done, businesses to be started, young people to be mentored. There's so many opportunities to travel into countries you've never been before.
Hi, Authentic Nation. Welcome to our channel where we talk everything faith, family, and finance, and everything in between. How are you, my king?
I am amazing. I actually am. I've had an amazing day. It's been awesome.
That's good.
I'm glad to be here. I'm looking forward to our session today.
Fantastic.
So what do you have in store for us?
I want us to talk about redeeming the time.
Okay.
The scripture says in Ephesians chapter 5 and verse 16, for us, it talks about us redeeming the time. And so it says to make the most of every opportunity in these evil days. So we're living at a time which is like no other time before.
Yeah.
I remember when we went into the pandemic, the one word that became one of the most used words was unprecedented. But you know what? We stepped into unprecedented times, and those times have not changed. If anything, it feels a little bit scarier out there. And yet for us who are a people of faith, we know in whom we have believed. And so the scripture tells us to redeem the time and to use our time wisely.
And so what that tells me is that we have to make the most of every opportunity that comes our way. In fact, I would go so far as to say we have to go out there and look for opportunities, because the time, as you said, is very short. It's quite amazing. I don't know if you feel this way, but I certainly do. It feels like the days are getting shorter. I can't believe we're already in March of 2024. It feels like just yesterday we were celebrating Christmas. And one of the things that we talk about regularly, you and I, is making sure that every hour that we're given, we use it to the best of our ability, so that we have no regrets. Are you with me? I often talk about people who are much older, because I like to listen and learn from the stories of people who are older. And so one of the things that some time ago I was listening to the stories of some people who were in their 90s and even 100 plus. I know in the UK, for example, there's at least 250 people who are over 110 years old, which is insane.
Yeah.
But the stories they tell
What are those
you,
called?
they're called really old.
Centenarians or something like
I guess,
that?
yeah. But one of the things that they all said was the fact that they regretted not taking more risk. If they were being asked the question, so if you had it to do again, what would you do differently? And they said, almost without exception, that I would take more risk.
Absolutely.
And one of the reasons why that's important is because when you're given time, you have a responsibility to use your resources, your energy, your creativity to maximize the opportunities that are in front of you, and not to be stayed, and not to be fearful, and not to just do the bare minimum because you're worried that maybe whatever you try won't succeed. The responsibility on us is to redeem the time, which means every hour that we're given, we've got to be figuring in our minds, how can I make the best of this hour? Not just in terms of generating income, but in terms of building relationships, in terms of enjoying the relationships that I have, in terms of enjoying my family, because I'm not always going to have the circumstances as I have them today. With every passing day, things are changing. Are you with me? And so you made reference, for example, Sarah, to the time that we had during the pandemic. It was quite a nerve-wracking time for a lot of people, because you're thinking all of a sudden you're confronted with the reality that, gosh, I'm confronted with a disease here that is taking out people all around me. And people became a bit more deliberate about how they were using their time, including in relationships. Do you see what I mean? Sometimes we have the tendency to take advantage and take for granted the people who are around us, because we think they're going to be there forever. The truth is they're not going to be. And so every day we have to maximize the time that we've been given.
I love the amplified version of the same scripture. It says, making the very most of your time on earth, recognizing and taking advantage of each opportunity, and using it with wisdom and diligence, because the days are filled with evil. And some translations, I believe, will say the days are short. And so it's important, like you're saying, that we take advantage and maximize the time we have, and never take one another for granted, nor put things off. If you've been putting off finding a new job, or starting that new course, that new degree, or literally just starting your new business, and you keep putting it off, let me tell you something. Time is not a luxury that we can just have the pomposity of thinking, I'll be around 3 years from now. And also with that degree that you're thinking, oh, I'm too old, I'm 36 years old now, it's too late for me to start. Let me tell you something, 3 years from now you're going to be 39 and still not have done that degree, and still not have started on that passion project that you've been talking about. So maximize the time that you have, where you have health and you have vitality and your mind is working and everything is in order. Maximize that time, because tomorrow is not a given. It is not a promise to anyone. The scripture talks about a rich man who said, oh, you know, I'm just, what does he say? He says, he
basically says, I've done a great job. You know, I've made a lot of money. I've got a lot of resources.
And just relax.
Yeah, so now I'm going to build barns.
I'm going
to put my produce into the barns and just say to myself, my soul, relax, take it easy. You know, I've done the best that I could have done. And God says, oh my gosh, I've got an issue with you. He says, this very day your soul is going to be required of you. And so we've got to be mindful that we don't even have the luxury of going into this thing called retirement. Are you with me?
That's what I was going to say.
Yeah, because
he thought he had the luxury of when to retire. And that's why you and I have said retirement is not in our vocabulary. We're never going to retire.
Never.
No, we're not retiring.
It doesn't matter how old we get. And
absolutely.
For two reasons. First of all, because, you know, people often say that the word retirement, or put it this way, they say in the Hebrew language, if a word doesn't exist, then it doesn't exist. Okay, because they call Hebrew God's language. And the word retirement doesn't exist in Hebrew. And so, you know, we had this conversation recently when we were talking about the fact that, well, where did retirement as a concept come from? It actually came from, for those of you who did history, it came from a guy called Otto von Bismarck, who was the Prussian chancellor. I think it was a German chancellor. And what he did is he came up with this idea, which then meant that people over a certain age had to retire, and that they would let young people come in and take over the jobs. And of course, this was in the late 1800s. But that concept has pervaded Western society and eventually the rest of the world. And so at a time when people are really coming into their own, you know, you now have figured out a lot about how life really works, and you've got a lot to give the next generation. That's the time when you're put to pasture, and suddenly you're going out there and you've got nothing to do, and before you know it, you're actually done. Because that's what eventually happens.
Absolutely, because you've got nothing to do.
Yeah, and so retirement is simply not an option. When you're talking about redeeming the time, that means it doesn't matter what stage of life you're in.
Season of life.
Yeah,
yes.
Exactly, I like that. Season of life.
Maximize every season of life.
Yes.
There's that 0 to 10, 0 to 20, when you're in primary school, and you know, you start in nursery school, and then you go into primary school, high school, and then you go into university. Every stage of life has got a season. And so we must never allow ourselves to be put to pasture by this concept, as you're saying, of retirement, where you're in your 60s and you've been told, you know what, you're no use anymore. Many people do die. It's to discover what it is that you need to be doing in that season of your life. It's to seek the face of God and say, God, I'm now in my 60s, I'm now in my 70s. What would you have me do in this season of my life? Great exploits are still to be done and still to be won by you in that season of life. You may be in your 80s and listening right now and feeling like, you know what, my bones don't work as much, I'm not as fast, but still there is a wealth of wisdom for you to dispense, for you to give out. There is a wealth of wisdom. 80 years is no joke. You understand? That is 8 decades of life, of wealth of wisdom, of experience. You need to make sure you make an impact and leave a legacy, and not die with all of those secrets and all of those learned and lived experiences, but to pass them on and to pass them down to those who are coming.
It's so true. Listen, redeeming the time means every second you're given is a blessing. Are you with me? And you know, I don't say this myself, but I heard somebody say the other day, they said every day above ground is a good day.
It's a good day.
And
I started using that. Every day above ground.
I think it's
a winning day.
It's a winning day. Yeah. You have an opportunity to actually live on purpose, and that's a great thing. And so even if you're in the place maybe where you've had some lean times and things aren't going the way that you wanted them to go, the scripture tells us that a living dog is better than a dead lion. And I know what I'd rather be. I'd rather be a living dog than a dead lion, for sure. Because as long as you're alive, as long as you have got breath in your body, you are still a candidate for a miracle. You can still do wonders. You can still use your time to impact other people, to transform the lot of this world. And as Sarah was saying, you know, even the fact that you're in your 80s doesn't mean that you have nothing to do. If anything, you've got time on your hands to really think. Your brain becomes your biggest resource. Maybe your physical energy is not where it needs to be. But listen, the long and short of it is you've got to redeem the time. There are books to be written, jobs to be done, businesses to be started, you know, young people to be mentored. There's so many opportunities to travel into countries you've never been before, to go out there and have new experiences. And that's something that we talk about all the time. Life really is about experiences, you know, going out there and enjoying things and not just saying one day I will do it, because procrastination is a horrible, horrible enemy of life and vitality.
Absolutely. A few months ago, I bumped into a neighbor of ours. We moved into our home side by side 45 years ago. And she's now 86. And she was bent over. She said to me, my body is what's worn, but my mind is still as sharp. I can still go with the best of them right now. My mind is still as sharp. And indeed, her mind was sharp. The outward exterior was perishing, but inside, that mind was still as keen and still as alive as ever before. So make use of every time that you have. She was outside her garden and she was weeding. Her garden was immaculate. She's 86 years old. She said, I don't need a gardener. I'll do it myself. That's what's keeping me alive. And then she stood straight upright and said she'd had a back surgery 6 years ago. She was in a wheelchair at the age of 80, and yet now she stood right straight up, you know, after bending and doing the weeding all day. And she said, you know what? I'm still okay. I'm still going. So like it said, you know, there's that old saying, it's not over until the fat lady sings. The fat lady,
she ain't sung yet.
She ain't sung yet. So don't put yourself to pasture. Redeem the time.
Absolutely.
God bless you, sis.
Have a good one. See you soon.
See you soon.